Jonas awoke with a sharp gasp, his body drenched in a cold sweat. The sheet beneath him was tangled around his ankles, trapping him like a net capturing a thrashing fish. His eyes darted around the dimly lit bedroom, as though searching for some immediate threat. Rationally, he knew no one lurked in the corners, but the images haunting his dreams still flickered in his mind. Distant gunfire, a scorching desert sun, and figures whose faces blended with the swirling dust. His heart hammered against his ribcage. He felt the disorientation that always followed him these days, an echo of the battles he had just left behind, or thought he had left behind. It had been weeks since he'd returned from deployment, and yet the war followed him everywhere, even into his own bed. Though he'd set his phone alarm for early, Jonas accepted that sleep had once again become an impossibility. He wiped his damp forehead with the back of his hand and sat up on the edge of the mattress. A faint glow from the street lamp outside bled through the window, illuminating the corners of his bedroom. His breathing gradually steadied as he coaxed himself to remember. I'm home. I'm safe. The war is over now. Only, it wasn't that simple. Ever since he'd arrived a month ago, he'd been saddled with an eerie sense that some of his memories didn't add up. He recalled a firefight near a stony ridge in the desert, but the official record stated that no such engagement had taken place during his squad's missions. He remembered a comrade named Bennett who'd supposedly served with him for a full tour, yet no one else recalled a soldier by that name. That same comrade's face was vivid in Jonas's mind, so he knew it wasn't a random fabrication. More disturbing was a pressing sensation that something vital was missing, as though a cluster of memories had vanished from his mind. He yanked on a t-shirt and made his way to the small kitchenette for coffee. As he fumbled with the machine, he stared at his reflection in the glossy surface of a cabinet door. Bags under his eyes told the story of many sleepless nights. A man still young in years, but weighed down by the horrors of conflict. Steam rose from the mug, delivering the bitter aroma that promised to sharpen his senses. Before heading out, he glanced at the clock. He had an appointment scheduled with the Department of Veterans Affairs for a routine post-war psychological evaluation. The phone calls from the VA had been insistent. "We absolutely need to follow up on your case, Mr. Hall," they had said. He couldn't refuse. Something gnawed at him that these appointments might lead him toward an explanation for his increasingly contradictory recollections. When Jonas arrived at the VA building, a hush enveloped him. Bright fluorescent lights overhead illuminated the neatly arranged chairs in the waiting area. The chemical smell of cleaning products was strong enough to sting his nostrils. He approached the reception desk, gave his name, and a stern-faced clerk asked him to sit until he was called. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, each of them marked by an unseen burden. Soldiers who'd lost limbs, who'd lost friends, who'd lost themselves. He thought he fit right in. Eventually, a nurse led him down a corridor lined with framed photographs of troops in various combat zones. Jonas studied each photograph as he walked, trying to see if any rang a bell of recognition. They all seemed vaguely familiar, from the shape of a desert dune to the posture of a soldier hunched over a rifle, but that was expected. Wars have a certain universality in their imagery of rubble and ruin. Soon, he was in a small examination room, alone. Moments later, Dr. Corso entered, glasses perched on the tip of her nose, her hair pulled into a tight bun. She was tall and possessed an air of authority. With a consoling half-smile, she invited him to sit. "How are you doing today, Sergeant Hall?" she asked, scanning a file resting on the table. Jonas hesitated. "I'm managing," he said, tired of burying the truth but still too guarded to voice his suspicions outright. "I've been having nightmares." Dr. Corso nodded. "That can be normal for a soldier who's recently returned. But I'd like more detail. Tell me about these nightmares." He described them haltingly at first, the firefights he remembered, the missions gone wrong, the image of the stony ridge he was certain he'd seen in person. He included the confounding recollection of Bennett. Plunging deeper than he intended, he remarked about how the official after-action reports clashed with his memory. Corso's face remained expressionless, but her eyes flicked up. "These experiences, do they feel as real to you as anything else you remember?" "Yes." A heat rose in Jonas's cheeks. Stating it so plainly felt strange, but acknowledging it was oddly liberating. There are times I'm absolutely certain that I was there with Bennett. We were pinned under enemy fire, the dust in the air from explosions. I vividly recall the feeling of adrenaline. Then I come back here, read the mission logs, and it's like everything's been wiped away, as though I made it all up. Dr. Corso stayed silent for a few more beats. Slowly, she removed her glasses. I want you to see a colleague of mine. Her name is Dr. Mehta. She specializes in psychological trauma and memory retrieval. She's been working with returning veterans who have reported incidents like yours. Incidents like mine? Jonas's pulse quickened. She pursed her lips, choosing her words. You aren't the only one struggling with memories that don't align with official records. I can't say more without Dr. Mehta's involvement, but you should see her soon. A prickle of apprehension played at the back of Jonas's mind. Still, he nodded. That persistent knot of confusion wouldn't unravel on its own, and he was desperate for clarity. Yeah, Dr. Mehta's office was tucked away in a private medical suite, separate from the main VA complex. Jonas arrived the next day, the hue of fluorescent lights flickering in the waiting room, a faint aroma of lavender coming from a diffuser on the receptionist's desk. A cluster of plush chairs surrounded a small table stacked with health pamphlets. He waited, dealing with the usual sense of tension. This was different from any normal therapy session. Something in Corso's voice had hinted at secrets only half spoken. Finally, Dr. Mehta emerged, a slender woman in a crisp, white lab coat. She had a calm demeanor that made Jonas feel slightly more at ease. She led him into her office, which was warmly lit. A tall bookshelf jammed with academic tomes lined one wall, and a small coffee machine hummed quietly in the corner. Two large windows admitted slats of sunlight, the blinds half raised. She gestured for him to sit in a comfortable armchair while she settled in one opposite him. Thank you for coming. I understand Dr. Corso asked you to see me. Jonas leaned forward. She said you specialize in memory issues related to trauma. Precisely, Dr. Mehta agreed. But it goes further than typical trauma therapy. I've been exploring cases where certain memories may have been altered or implausibly present. Can you walk me through your experiences? He repeated his story, the mismatched memories of firefights, the phantom soldier named Bennett, hazy recollections of classified briefings. Beleaguered by the thought that he might be losing his grip on reality, Jonas laid it all out as honestly as he could. Dr. Mehta listened carefully, tapping her pen lightly against a notepad. Then she spoke in a measured tone. From what I can tell, you might be experiencing artificially implanted memories. I'm aware this sounds like something out of a science fiction program, but it isn't unheard of. There are neurological procedures that can insert or remove pieces of recollection. Some suspect black ops agencies and private defense contractors have dabbled in these experiments on unwitting soldiers. A wave of dizziness rolled over Jonas. He couldn't fully register what she was implying. Are you saying the government put false memories in my head? She pressed her lips together. The science behind it is preliminary, but there is growing evidence of covert programs aimed at implanting false experiences in selected personnel. The purpose might be to obscure actual missions, to manipulate your sense of reality, or to test new technology in the field. I can't say for sure. Her words, though quietly spoken, thundered in Jonas's mind. He swallowed hard, his chest tight. If even a fraction of what she was suggesting was true, then everything he believed he'd endured overseas could be a carefully woven tapestry of lies. The next week blurred. Jonas agreed to a few sessions of guided hypnotic therapy with Dr. Mehta, who hoped to navigate the labyrinth of his recollections. Each session took place in the same softly lit room, with Jonas leaning back, breathing deeply, letting Dr. Mehta's soothing voice guide him into a calm, suggestible state. Initially, he encountered the same set of memories he'd always described: the desert firefights, Bennett at his side, the rocky ridge looming in the distance. Then came fleeting glimpses of something else, ephemeral as the sudden flicker of a light. A laboratory, a metallic table, a faceless figure holding a syringe poised at his temple. The scenes flitted in and out of focus, so intangible that Jonas wasn't sure if he was imagining them. Between sessions, he could scarcely think of anything else. Some nights he found himself drawn to the dusty boxes in his attic, labeled with relics of his deployment. Old boots, some letters from comrades he hadn't opened yet. He rummaged for proof of his real experiences, hoping to find a name, a photograph, anything with Bennett. But the deeper he dug, the more he was appalled by the lack of evidence to support what he so vividly remembered. If Bennett truly existed, he had apparently left no trace. One morning, Jonas received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single typed page. "We know what you're doing. Stop investigating. The truth won't set you free." He stared at the anonymous message. Every hair on his neck bristled. The menacing words roiled in his stomach, fueling his paranoia. Was someone monitoring his therapy sessions? Who even knew about the hypnosis or his suspicions? His mind churned out one possibility after another. That very evening, while rummaging through his phone, Jonas discovered a suspicious text from a number he didn't recognize. "You're not alone in this. Park bench by the river." Despite the danger implied by the note in the envelope, the cryptic nature of the text ignited Jonas's curiosity. If someone out there had answers, he wanted them. Clinging to that faint hope, he decided to follow the lead. Night had fallen by the time Jonas arrived at the riverside park. The path was lit by a scattering of old-fashioned lampposts struggling to push back the darkness. A short distance away, the city skyline shimmered in reflection on the water's surface. Jonas scanned the area for any sign of watchers. He wore a plain hoodie and jeans, making no obvious display of his military background. If a threat lurked, he wanted to appear innocuous. A lone figure sat on the bench, face hidden by the shadow of a baseball cap. Trying to quell his racing heart, Jonas approached. The figure turned slightly, enough for Jonas to see a sharp jaw, eyes that flicked up. "You came?" the stranger said, voice low. Jonas nodded, taking a seat on the opposite end of the bench. A moment of tense silence stretched as the night breeze carried the murmur of distant traffic. "Who are you?" Jonas finally asked. The stranger shifted to face him. "First, let's settle that we're on the same side. My name isn't important. I'm a civilian contractor used to work with a team specializing in advanced psychological warfare techniques for the government. I left when I realized they were experimenting on soldiers." Jonas exhaled a shaky breath. This was what he both feared and needed to hear. Experimenting how? They were looking into memory manipulation, installing experiences in frontline soldiers to test readiness or to cover up sensitive missions. The stranger's voice was taut with anger. "I encountered one set of files referencing your name. I've been trying to track you down since then." A swirl of emotions battered Jonas's mind. "So I'm not just paranoid?" "No," the stranger confirmed. "Usually they push false memories to hide something else. If you dig deeper, you might uncover details they'd do anything to bury." Jonas stared at his trembling hands. For weeks, months, he had doubted his own sanity. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I couldn't stand by and watch. I'll give you what I have, but you have to understand the risks." The stranger tapped his phone, sending Jonas a file via a quick digital transfer. "These documents might fill in more gaps than you're ready for. But trust me, once you start reading, you'll realize you can't turn back." Jonas felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He despised the internal war between fear and anger. He had to push for the truth, no matter the danger. Before he could say thank you, the stranger stood. "Watch your back, because they're definitely watching you." And just like that, the figure disappeared into the darkness, leaving Jonas alone on the bench with a phone that suddenly felt heavier than lead. Back at his apartment, he locked the door and checked the windows in a sweeping motion, ensuring no silhouettes lingered outside. His trembling fingers navigated to the secure app the stranger had used to send the file, a collection of heavily redacted documents loaded on the screen, peppered with timestamps, coded references to projects with cryptic names, and the occasional mention of subject data. He began reading. A wave of nausea twisted in his gut. The documents referenced an operation codenamed Tesseract. Brief glimpses indicated that two commanding officers, Colonel Haverton and Major Reeves, oversaw the project. They aim to implement false recollective modules in field operatives to facilitate operational security. Some lines recounted successful attempts to suppress or rewrite key events. Others documented subjects who displayed irregularities in recalling mission parameters. Then, Jonas stumbled upon a cluster of references that outlined something labeled Procedure FD29. Words leapt off the screen. Surgical ejection of microneural implant, direct memory imprinting, subject experiences alternative recollection. He noticed a date, suspiciously close to a time frame he remembered being in a field hospital. His head spun. So that unexplained hospital stay, that supposedly routine post-engagement check, might have been far more insidious. With each passing line, Jonas's hands shook harder. The document cited a high rate of compliance once memories were overwritten, but a small chance subjects might see their original recollections bleed through. He stumbled across a list of specially designed memory triggers, objects or phrases that could prompt a subject to recall fabricated missions. That was perhaps why Dr. Corso, or Dr. Mehta, had so quickly noticed his anomalies. He was living proof of the procedure's imperfection. As he neared the final batch of documents, an internal reference to Op Lockjaw caught his attention. According to the text, this was the real mission Jonas and his squad had undertaken. Something so clandestine that it had to be hidden behind layers of falsified memory. Redactions obscured the majority of details, but Jonas read enough to glean that it involved infiltration into a supposed friendly zone to disable advanced weaponry that threatened Allied forces. The reason for the cover-up was unclear, but it smelled of a major breach of official treaties. Jonas closed the file. He exhaled a ragged breath. There it was. Confirmation that multiple threads of his memory, of being in a place that didn't quite line up with the dates and logs, were artificially inserted. And something else lurked behind those implants. Some covert operation that, if exposed, might blow the lid off a vast conspiracy. A few days later, Jonas confided in Dr. Mehta. He needed her professional insight for these shocking revelations. Meeting in her office, released behind drawn blinds, he showed her the documents. She scrolled through them in stunned silence, occasionally pressing a hand to her mouth. "At first I suspected some advanced method to help veterans cope," she murmured. "But this is something darker. They essentially hijacked your mind to ensure you wouldn't recall the actual mission." Jonas felt his mouth go dry. The question is why? And how far does this go? Dr. Mehta leaned back in her chair, fear betraying itself in her widened eyes. "These are top-level documents. If they discover you have them, you could be in real danger. Are you sure you want to pursue this further?" He hesitated. Part of him wanted to tuck the truth away and live out his days in ignorant peace, not to risk crossing powerful people who might have no qualms about silencing a single soldier. But even more so, he felt that the truth had been torn from him once already. He refused to let it happen again. "I've got to see it through," he said softly. Dr. Mehta nodded, though worry pinched her face. "Then we have to be very careful. Taking these documents to the press right now might trigger a swift response. We need leverage, something that compels them not to bury you, so to speak." In the days that followed, Jonas and Dr. Mehta strategized. They arranged clandestine calls with select reporters Jonas trusted, ensuring each conversation was encrypted. With the help of the stranger's files, they tried piecing together enough vital data to prove the existence of Tesseract, but not so much that they lost control over the narrative. Late one evening, Jonas found himself stationed in his apartment living room, the overhead light off, the only illumination coming from his laptop. Dr. Mehta was there, scanning the files on another device. They needed absolute secrecy. Suddenly, Jonas's phone buzzed, another unknown number. He picked it up warily. "Jonas Hall," a gravelly voice said. "I know you've found out some inconvenient truth, but trust me, you don't want to keep digging." He recognized the name, Colonel Haverton maybe, or Major Reeves. Time seemed to slow, every sense heightened. "Are you threatening me?" A sardonic laugh. "We prefer to call it preventive action. The data you're reading, it's above your clearance. Hand it over, or we'll reclaim it ourselves, and I promise you'll regret standing in our way." The phone clicked, line dead. Jonas's heart hammered. He relayed the conversation to Dr. Mehta, who pressed her lips together grimly. "We need to move fast." They set an urgent meeting with a reputable investigative journalist named Lin Sao, who'd proven her mettle by breaking classified military contractor stories. Under the cover of darkness, Jonas and Dr. Mehta slipped into a small coffee shop that was closed for the evening, courtesy of Lin's connections. The door was unlocked for them. Inside, only the ornamental lights above the bar provided a gentle glow. Lin was already waiting, her eyes calm but serious. One glance at Jonas's tense posture and she said, "Let me see what we're dealing with." They explained everything, Jonas's shifting memories, the hypnosis, the threatening phone calls, the ultra-black project Tesseract. Lin listened thoughtfully. Jonas gave her a flash drive containing the redacted documents. She inserted it into her laptop and scanned through. "You understand," Lin said quietly. "Publishing this could ignite a storm. I'll need to corroborate evidence, maybe from other sources, but if this is legitimate, it's massive." Jonas swallowed. "We have to expose it, otherwise more soldiers might suffer the same fate, or worse." Lin nodded. "I can't guarantee your safety, though. Once this goes public, you can't be sure of your future. My advice is to stay somewhere out of sight until this breaks. Then we'll see how the government responds." Not 2 nights passed before Jonas heard suspicious footsteps outside his apartment door. The second he looked through the peephole, he saw men dressed in dark suits. His blood froze. Without hesitation, he grabbed a small backpack of essentials he'd prepared in case things went sideways. He texted Dr. Mehta a single word: "Go." The hallway fell silent. Then a forceful knock. Jonas's pulse raced as he dashed to the secondary exit in the bedroom. He unlatched the window, swung his legs onto the fire escape, and quietly made his way down. A muffled crash resounded from the living room as the door was broken in. With a single glance up, Jonas witnessed one of the men's silhouettes stepping into his empty apartment. Once at street level, Jonas sprinted through the alley, the cool night air burning in his lungs. He fought the urge to look over his shoulder, expecting the men in black suits to be right behind him, but no one seemed to be there. He zigzagged across a few blocks, arriving at a prearranged safe house, an old building that Dr. Mehta had arranged with a local contact who believed in exposing government overreach. Knocking 3 times, he recognized her voice behind the door. She let him in, heart pounding, her eyes reflecting the severity of their situation. Soon, they found a news alert on social media. A major news site had teased an upcoming expose detailing covert experimentation on U.S. servicemen. Lin was moving forward. "Now we wait," Jonas said, sinking onto a battered armchair, "and hope that the truth doesn't bury us." They spent the night in that safe house. Neither slept, adrenaline fueling their vigil. Dr. Mehta paced by the window while Jonas scanned news sites for the slightest sign of a bombshell story or a lethal cover-up. Morning light brought the story. Lin's expose went live at dawn. Headlines blazed. Evidence of memory manipulation program in military. Redacted documents, screenshots, references to Tesseract. Interview snippets quoting anonymous sources supporting Jonas's claims. Jonas's mind reeled. He stared at his phone, reading through the article again and again, relief mixing with profound dread. Lives were about to change. Reputations could be destroyed. He might be targeted more than ever. On the other hand, the world now had tangible evidence of something monstrous. He and Dr. Mehta cautiously emerged from the safe house later in the day, scanning for watchers. News vans parked near the VA building. Groups of veterans huddled in anxious clusters outside, discussing the allegations. The scandal had erupted like wildfire. Across multiple channels, denials poured in from official spokespeople, but the mention of Tesseract was too specific. Jonas felt that, despite the blowback, a shred of hope existed now that the truth was out. The question: would the government quietly shift blame or officially investigate? He secretly expected a wave of scapegoating. But as the hours passed, more veterans stepped forward, describing experiences eerily similar to Jonas's. The story grew arms and legs, refusing to be silenced. Jonas spotted the initial trickle of phone calls from unknown vets who recognized themselves in the story's details. The coverage soared beyond anything a single threat from Colonel Haverton or Major Reeves could contain. By the following evening, Dr. Corso reached out to Jonas in a flurry, her usually calm tone replaced by heightened agitation. "I've been interviewed twice by different news outlets. They want to know about you, about Tesseract. The VA didn't give me directions, so I told them what little I knew. Are you okay?" Jonas said that he was safe for the time being. He thanked her for not dismissing him when he first presented with the contradictory memories. Without her referring him to Dr. Mehta, he'd probably still be in the dark. Another few days passed. Jonas scanned updates on social media, news platforms, and alternative blogs. The coverage was explosive. Military spokespeople insisted such claims were outlandish, but they also promised to launch an internal investigation. Whispers emerged of congressional hearings forming. Jonas still felt a coil of anxiety in his stomach, expecting retribution at any moment. At midday, his phone flashed with a message from the same unknown number that had threatened him before. "You've lit a fire. Prepare for the consequences." Though fear prickled his skin, Jonas found an unexpected inner resolve. He was no longer alone in this fight. The spotlight shining on Tesseract was too bright to be easily snuffed out. Meanwhile, other voices were corroborating his experiences, amplifying the call for accountability. Standing before a mirror, Jonas studied his reflection. He thought about the soldier he had been when he first came home, tortured by false memories, unsure of who he really was, doubting his own sanity. Now, even if the world at large only recognized a fraction of the truth, at least his experiences were validated. He was forging a path toward understanding what had genuinely happened to him and what had not. He breathed deeply, letting the tension in his shoulders fade. The fight wasn't over. There might be depositions, threats, possibly harassment from Black Ops forces angry at the leak. However, Dr. Mehta had already arranged top-grade legal counsel, and the journalist Lynn was rallying public support. For all the swirling chaos, Jonas felt the anchor of certainty. The truth was out there now, and it couldn't be crammed back under lock and key as easily as before. In the days that followed, more details surfaced. Journalists managed to connect Tesseract to certain unscrupulous defense contractors. Allegations suggested that the project was part of a broader scheme to develop obedient soldiers who would carry out morally ambiguous missions while believing they were part of routine engagements. The public outcry intensified. Political figures launched statements about the sanctity of soldiers' mental well-being, and committees hinted at major investigations into undisclosed programs. Amid the uproar, Jonas faced a swirl of conflicting emotions: relief, anger, vulnerability, and the haunting sense that simply exposing a secret wasn't the same as justice. Yet, as he saw other soldiers come forth, each describing the same sense of displacement and confusion, he realized he had done the right thing. Standing together, they could force the government to acknowledge the betrayal of its own troops. Each morning, Jonas still woke sweating from nightmares. Some nightmares were about the false recollections that plagued him, others about the real mission he might never fully remember, the details locked inside the corners of his mind. He knew the process of healing, of disentangling implanted illusions from genuine recollections, could take years, but for the first time he saw a glimmer of a path forward. He began therapy sessions in earnest, continuing with Dr. Mehta under secure arrangements. They made progress. She guided him to confront each memory, to label it either suspected fabrication or possible truth. It was painstaking, but each step untangled part of the chaos roiling in his mind. Eventually, his nights grew quieter. Some mornings he even woke peacefully, the disorienting nightmares at bay. He still had more questions than answers about how Tesseract had gained the green light, who precisely had ordered his procedure, and how high the cover-up escalated. But the crucial step shattering the secrecy was already accomplished. One afternoon, Jonas found himself flipping through old photographs from his earlier years in the service. A younger version of himself smiled beside genuine comrades he vividly remembered. Those were real images, real experiences, not forced illusions. He held the photograph, feeling a warmth in his chest. It reminded him that reality, however scarred, was always worth defending. A few days later, Jonas stood at a podium in a modest press room, flanked by Dr. Mehta and Lin. A small gathering of reporters aimed their cameras at him. He took a steadying breath. Once he began, there would be no turning back, even though he was already well past that point. Piece by piece, he recounted his story, returning from war to discover his memories conflicted with official records, suspecting he was losing his mind, and ultimately learning he'd been used as a guinea pig in a sinister experiment. His hands trembled slightly as he concluded, "I stand here today not just for myself, but for every man and woman who served, who might also be trapped by false memories forced upon them. For every soldier who's been exploited by those meant to protect us. I want justice. We served our country honorably. We deserve the truth." The barrage of camera flashes was blinding and questions flew at him, but Jonas lifted his gaze, unwavering. In that flash of white-hot light, he felt clarity. He had once been the instrument of a hidden agenda, but now he was shedding light on it. Later, when the cameras were off, Dr. Mehta placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" Jonas nodded, exhaling the tension. "Perhaps not fully, but for the first time I believe I can be." No longer was he haunted by the shadow of an unnamed fear. No longer did he wander between illusions crafted by psychologists in secret labs. He had begun the long climb toward regaining himself, and as more soldiers found their voices and joined him, he sensed that the days of hidden experiments and stolen memories might, at last, be numbered.